Okay, Boker Tov. Today's daf is Memtet 49. We pick up at the bottom of Memchet Bet. I also want to wish everybody a good Erev Lag BaOmer. People should be aware, according to the Ramah, you're allowed to get a haircut today, except for Kavod Shabbos, just mentioning that, if it's relevant. Okay, anyway, picking up at the bottom of Memchet Bet, we are now discussing the position of Rabbi Shimon and the Rabbanan. Rabbi Shimon, the Mishnah says, if you have a courtyard, 3 courtyards, and A and B make an Eruv and B and C make an Eruv, then you can, A and B can carry in their space, and B and C can carry in their space and move around objects from one of the courtyards to the other. And the rabbis disagree, and the Gemara on the Amud Aleph said that the reason the rabbis disagreed was a concern that if we let A carry into space B, then he would come to carry into space C, and in that way it was different than the case of 3 people where there was not a concern of all of the moving around and confusion. So that was what the Gemara first said. Then the Gemara thank you very much. The Gemara then wanted to understand or wanted to explain that why there would be a reason to disagree. So we'll pick up again from the bottom of Memchet Bet why the Chachamim disagree, and this might be different than the reason of Gzeira that the Gemara had initially said. So Amar Rav Yudah Marav, 4 lines from the bottom, Zu Devi Rabbi Shimon. This is the position of Rabbi Shimon. Aval Chachamim Omrim, but the Chachamim say, Rishus Achas Mishameshes L'Shtei Rishuyot, V'lo Shtei Rishuyot Mishameshet L'Rishut Achat. Well, that's self-explanatory, which is why you have that huge tosus there. So what Rashi says that means is, and I explained this yesterday, I see it got erased, and I see that somebody wrote with non-dry erasing. Okay. Anyway, the way I explained it according to Rashi was, if you have your A, B, C, right, and they've made these 2 types of things, okay, so the reason to say Rabbi Shimon might not agree about all of that is, the way Rashi explains it is, A can move into B, C can move into B, but B can't go to A and can't go to C because that's pulling it in opposite directions, and B therefore has a contradictory identity. I try to sort of symbolize it like this, that if you have B is the main rishus, if you're focusing on B, and B tries to move into A and tries to move into C, it's sort of, that's an idea of, that's what doesn't work, that's shtei rishuyot, A and C cannot serve B, because B is being pulled both ways. But you can have this, because shtei rishuyot, which is rishut achat, B can serve both A and C because there's no contradiction from A's perspective to have an A, B, and from C's perspective to have a C, B. But from B's perspective, for B to carry into A, that would not be good. That's the way Rashi explains it. As that is a very different reason than the Gemara said yesterday, which is the reason of which said that A can't carry into that. The reason the rabbis didn't like it is once you allow carrying, it's going to lead from A going into C. This is a more principled objection of conceptually B being pulled in both directions. I should mention, however, that Tosfos disagrees with this read, and Tosfos makes it consistent with the Gemara's idea that the reason the Chachamim disagree is they're afraid it will lead to a problem, a gzeira, that A will carry to C. What Tosfos says is the exact opposite. B can go into A, and B can go into C, because it's not going to create a problem. But if A cannot go into B, and C cannot go into B. Why? Because if we let A go into B, then the objects that A moved from B will eventually find their way over to C, and that's the concern that it'll lead to the A-C case. So according to Rashi, A and C can go into B can't go in the opposite way, and according to Tosfos, it's the exact reverse because of the concern that the Gemara had said yesterday, that if we allow carrying if we allow this type of carrying, it's going to lead ultimately A to C. Okay, so 2 reasons why the rabbis might disagree with Rabbi Shimon. Yes?
We're talking about carrying, not Tom Shabbos, right?
Correct. This is all within a courtyard. It's all about carrying objects, and I should also reinforce, carrying objects that began in courtyard A into courtyard B, or began in courtyard B into courtyard A. It's not who's doing the carrying. It doesn't matter which person is doing the carrying. It matters which objects are being carried. Okay.
Yeah, don't you need an akira and an achas?
Yes. So this is all rabbinic anyway, and it's not. Nobody calls this an isser hotzah. It's all in a rishus hayachid. So this is like an isser of eruve, eruve chatzeros. That there's the idea of eruve chatzeros is if you don't make an erev chatzeros, let's say even within one courtyard, although it's all Rishus HaYachid, the idea is that the rabbis say you can't carry from the courtyard to the house or the house to the courtyard because rabbinically, those are seen as different rishuyot. One is a domain of a lot of people shared, and one is private. So here too, the concern is that you're right. The concern of A carrying into C or A carrying into B, if there weren't an Eruv, is seen as like a violation of the Eruv Chatzeros. I don't think we're sort of calling it a type of a hotzah, a type of a rabbinic hotzah. I don't think that's the way it's conceptualized. What you're asking is, would we be more lenient? Well, that's from Rishus HaRabim. This is all Rishus HaYachid, but it's the need to unify distinct Rishus HaYachid. So what you're asking is, and I'm sure there's an answer to this, is like, are there more leniencies if you carry from two courtyards that have not made an Eruv together, but they're Rishus HaYachid? Is there more leniencies if you don't do an Akira, if you don't do a Hanacha, right? You conceptualize it in terms of Hotza'ah. I don't know. I don't think I might. I have not seen that at all as emphasized. It seems to be a distinct, like derabanan of carrying in courtyards that don't have eruvs. Of moving objects from one courtyard into another that doesn't have an eruv. Okay, so again, eruv not meaning what we say. When we say an eruv, we're talking about carrying outdoors and turning a carmelis into a Rishus HaYachid. This is talking that you have Rishus HaYachids, but you're creating a unified Rishus HaYachid. All right, so that's the issue. The rabbis disagree. You can go in one direction, not in the other, either because conceptually it's a contradiction, or for Tosfos it's a gzeira. So now the Gemara says, Ki Amrise, last line of Mem Chet Amud Bet. That's what Rav Yudah, first Rav Yudah said this in the name, first there was an Amar Rav Yudah Rav, then it says, Ki Amrise Kamidi Shmuel, so Rav Yudah says, now when I said this over to Shmuel, this position of Rav, that the Chachamim disagree in one direction and not in the other, Amar Li, he said to me, no, Avzu Divrei Rabbi Shimon, that's still Rabbi Shimon's position. I'll get back to what that line means in a minute. The sages say, Shloshan Asuras. You're wrong. You wanted to say that the rabbis say you can still go one way, not the other way. Debate Rashi will tell us which way you can go. He says, no, that's within Rabbi Shimon. The Chachamim say you can't move from any direction. A can't go to B, B can't go to A. C can't go to B, B can't go to C. No courtyard can go to any other. It's not like it's okay one way and not okay the other way. All right, now, what is the reason why the Chachamim would be so absolute? So again, you could say that would be a Gzeira reason, even though technically you could say, let's do it Tosfos way, that B moving to A is less of a concern of a Gzeira. Nevertheless, the Chachamim say once we allow any commerce between any courtyards, eventually it's going to lead to A moving to C, and therefore we have to say it's all forbidden. Okay, so it's not that the Chachamim half agree, the Chachamim completely disagree, and the Chachamim say you can't go in any direction. Now, 1 minute, what does it mean when he says these are the words of Rabbi Shimon? Meaning, we had said that Rabbi Shimon said you can go in all directions, and now it's saying when you said one direction yes, and one direction no, even that is Rabbi Shimon. So Rashi says what that means is that's coming to limit Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Shimon, who you thought could say A to B and B to A, no. This idea of only one direction, even Rabbi Shimon agrees to that. Rabbi Shimon is not as broadly permissive as you said he was, that you could go in all directions. That's the way Rashi says it. Tosfos has a slightly more elegant read, because it's strange. It sounds very clear from the Mishnah that the Mishnah is totally fine whether A goes to B or B goes to A. It sounds like Rabbi Shimon is across the board permissive. So Tosfos reads it, this idea that one direction is still okay, that's within Rabbi Shimon. Meaning the idea that any direction is okay is limited to Rabbi Shimon. The Chachamim say no direction is okay. All right, so this is now, I know this is getting a little confusing, but just to try to simplify it, you have this say, A, B made an Eruv, B, C made an Eruv. Rabbi Shimon says A and B can carry amongst themselves and B and C can carry amongst themselves. That's what Rabbi Shimon says. Now, what do the Chachamim say? So the first opinion is the Chachamim would say one direction is okay, one direction is not okay. Debate Rashi Tosfos which way, but it doesn't matter for now. One direction is good, one is not good. And then Shmuel says, I'm sorry. any idea that any direction is good is limited to Rabbi Shimon. The Chachamim say it's across the board not good. A can't go to B, B can't go to A, and same with C and B. Okay, so that's now where we're holding in the Gemara. There were a couple of questions. We'll start with Paula. Yes?
Then why bother putting these together in the first place
if all three are no good? Yeah, well, they didn't realize. Nobody checked the halacha ahead of time. But you're right. We're going to see it. Yes. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, Charlie?
But B might be able to carry in B and A.
Yes, the assumption still is that you can carry in your own zone. And now we're going to actually see what happens, what will be a scenario where you might even be not able to carry in your own zone. Okay? But right now, that's the idea. Rabbi Shimon allows you going, everybody agrees you can't go A to C. Rabbi Shimon allows, A within B, A to B, B to A, maybe both ways or whatever, and the Chachamim don't allow anything. That's at least Shmuel's version. Now the Gemara says, Tani kavasi to Rabbi Yehuda liba to Shmuel. We taught like Rabbi Yehuda within Shmuel that according to the Chachamim it's all forbidden. They don't allow any direction. Amar Rabbi Shimon, said Rabbi Shimon, this is a braita. What's this case about the three people whose four amot overlap? Remember, that's how we got into this. Three courtyards open one to the other and open into the street. And A and B combined and B and C combined. You can bring from your house into the shared zone and eat. Let's say A can bring into the B zone and eat, and C can bring into the B zone and eat. And then when you have leftover food, you can take your leftover food from the B zone and bring it back into A, or from the B zone and bring it back into C, if you were a C person. So meaning, you're okay. A and B works and B and C works for themselves. Okay? Maybe it even suggests that it works in both directions. It's a little vague. But we'll read it Tosfos' way, that according to Shmuel, he says, no, for Rabbi Shimon, you can go A, B, B, A, no problem. That's Rabbi Shimon. Aval, the Chachamim say, Shloshan Asurot. That was the punchline, okay? So here you see it's very clear that it's not that the Chachamim half agree. The Chachamim say across the board, A, B, C, at least in any shared zone is off limits. Okay, presumably each one can do their own zone, but any shared zone is off limits. So we have Rabbi Shimon saying it works, maybe in one direction, maybe in both, and the Chachamim saying that, at least according to Shmuel, nothing works. Okay, according to Rav, one direction works. Okay, now the Gemara says like this: the Alter Shmuel l'taimei. Shmuel goes according to his reasoning. The Amar Shmuel, because Shmuel says Chotzer shebein shnei mevoot. Just in case it was getting too easy, we now have, instead of three chatzerot, we have one chatzer. Here's your chatzer, right, and it's got all its various houses. Okay, and this chatzer opens up into two streets. Okay. It opens up into two opposite streets. Now, who cares that it opens into a street? Well, we'll see in a minute. Okay, but it opens into these two streets. Now, these streets, mavoi, alleyways, have opening into them other courtyards. And you might know and remember, there's an idea of shitufei mava'ot, that if all courtyards want to share an alleyway, right, all these courtyards, they might have made their own Eiruvin, and they want to share this alleyway, then they have to make a shituf mava'ot. All the courtyards have to then get together to use the alleyway, okay? So this is a mavoi, like a street, okay? And each courtyard could have made its own, but the question is using the share. Now this opens up into two of those streets, and it might not have made an Eruv, a shituf with the other courtyards to use those streets. So let's take a look. Okay. Eiruvin shnehem, asura im shnehem. Lo Eiruvin shnehem, oseret al shnehem. Okay, again, that was clear. So Eiruvin shnehem, if it did this, right, again, like an A, B, B, C type of a case, but not together. It did this, and it did this. Okay, Eiruvin shnehem. So it is. So what's the halacha? Eiruvin shnehem. The halacha is asura im shnehem. It can't use the street in either case. It cannot use the shared zone. Now this is like a case of of A, B, C. Why can it not use the shared zone? So Tosfos says this is just because Shmuel paskins like the Chachamim against Rabbi Shimon. Okay, so he's passing like the Chachamim against Rabbi Shimon. It's his general position that Shloshan Asurot, and there's no way that the shared zone can be used because since it would lead to A going in, eventually bringing into that zone. That's the way Tosfos explains. Rashi tries to say, and I'm not going to spell out how this works because it's just going to confuse you more, that Shmuel is actually saying this according to Rabbi Shimon. But because Shmuel would pass in halacha kedivri hameka be'eruv, and somehow even within Rabbi Shimon there would be a problem here. But I will not confuse you with that. Just for simplicity's sake, Tosfos says this is going according to Chachamim, so it's an ABC. Shmuel's going like his reasoning. Shlosh nasurot, no direction is okay. We've got a problem according to that. But each one can at least carry in their own courtyard. That's implicit. You just can't carry into this new space. Okay, so that's the next line. Lo irva'im shnehem oseret al shnehem. If, however, there was no Eruv, and here now it's going to start to get easier, believe it or not. If, however, there was no Eruv at all, okay, then we've got a problem. Then, if there was no Eruv at all, then not only can it not carry from one to the other, but hold on just one second, let me just double check before I say this. Hold on. Right. But even these guys here, if there was no Eruv, then even these guys cannot carry into the street, even if they sort of made their own thing. Okay? Why not? So why is it that even if it wasn't included, right, why is it that their presence here makes this street forbidden to those guys? Why is it Oseres al Shnehem? What did it do, right, to impinge upon that space? So we are going to see that the point is that they basically, look, they're here, they're caught between streets. What's the basic way the people here, go out to work? Let's assume that basically this is the main street, and everybody just, they go to work this way. They all come out into this street. So therefore, they are considered to be present in that street, and therefore you cannot make an Eruv around that street and not include all the courtyards. This is one of the courtyards, right? Normally, right, just a simple case. Here's your mavoi. Here are all your courtyards that open up into your mavoi, right? So the same way you can't make in a courtyard three of the houses and not two of them. All the houses have to join together. Here too, all of the courtyards have to join together. Okay? So in this type of a case, if it said sat out, okay, not only does it mean that you can't go from like one courtyard to the next, it even means that this street is off limits to these guys because now you don't have all the courtyards joining in together. Okay, so let's take a look at that. Okay, and now that's what we're going to focus on, and this is easier to get your head around conceptually. Okay, so now the Gemara says like this. It primarily went out one street and not the others, and not the other street. The one that it primarily used, asur. Mutar. So the example I gave, if this was the main street, the question is, which street is this courtyard part of? Which group of, because a collection of courtyards around a street. So if this was its main street, then we basically define this as the group. And therefore, nobody can use the street because you didn't include one of the courtyards. Even if these three guys got together, they didn't include one of their courtyards. And therefore, none of them can use the street. But these guys are okay because this courtyard is considered part of this group and not part of that group. Okay? So that's the question. And now the whole issue is, which street are they primarily part of? So the first determinant is, which is the main one that they use. Okay. Amar Rabbi bar Rav Huna. So Rabbi Rav Huna said, Irva im she'ena regila bo, huta regila la'atzmo. He says, you know what? That's by default. By default, they relate to the one that they have, the street they mostly use. But they're allowed to redefine it. And if they went ahead and they said, even if they primarily use this street, they went ahead and they said, we're going to make an Eruv with these guys. Okay? They chose to make an Eruv with those guys. Then you're allowed to do that and to say, I relate to here, this will be Broadway, and this will be Central Park West. Okay, so, if they went ahead and make an Eruv with these guys, they could say, we're part of the Broadway group, we're part of the Broadway street, even if it's the one they use less. and that then frees up these guys to make an Eruv without them and to use Central Park West without including that middle courtyard. Okay? So yes, by default, you're connected to the street you use most. But you can, if you chose to make an Eruv with the other guys, that works. So I'll read that again. If you made an Eruv with the court street, the guys of the courtyards of the street that you don't usually use, Huta Regila La'atzmo, then the one you usually use you're no longer part of, and that can work with the other courtyards. Amar Rabbi bar Rav Huna Amar Shmuel. Now Rabbi bar Rav Huna also said in the name of Shmuel, in Irva Regila La'atzmo, v'zeh she'eina Regila bo, lo irev. So let's say the group from Central Park West, the Regila, they made La'atzmo, they made their own Eruv without including the middle courtyard. Okay? V'zeh she'eina Regila bo, lo irev, v'atzmo lo irva. And neither of these two guys, right, made an Eruv, okay? So these guys did not do anything to let them use Broadway. This guy didn't do anything. So you got it? That's the scenario. These guys made an Eruv without including the middle courtyard, and none of these guys even tried to make an Eruv around Broadway. So Broadway, anyway, even if you took away this courtyard, is off limits to these guys, because they didn't make a shituf of all of them to use Broadway. So, wait a minute, in that case, Dochin eto ota etzo she'ina regila bo. So then we could say, even though normally we say this goes with the Central Park West because it's regila, unless it very actively makes an Eruv and associates itself up there with Broadway, right? We normally would say that because this is the natural grouping. Nevertheless, it doesn't hurt anyone in this case to say it's part of the Broadway group, right? Because if you say it's part of the Broadway group, that means, well, already nobody can use Broadway. So by making them part of the Broadway group, right, you're not hurting anyone. You got it? Meaning in the case where these guys made an Eruv and these guys made an Eruv and these guys did not. So whichever group you associate them with, you're going to hurt. Because then you're going to say that you've got a courtyard that isn't part of your Eruv. So neither group wants these as part of them if they haven't been part of the Eruv. Okay, and so what would we say then? Then we would say, tough luck, you go with the street you mostly use, and these guys now have a problem. Okay, but if these guys didn't make an Eruv, so they're not going to be hurt by saying that this is part of the group above. So we just say, all right, we'll make it part of the group above. We'll make life easier for people. And then it ends by saying, Ukagon zeh, and this would be an example of Kofin al Midas Sodom, which is a very cute line. Kofin al Midas Sodom means, Midas Sodom is an approach that says, mine is mine and yours is yours. Meaning, I don't want yours, but I have no responsibility to give you anything, even if it doesn't cost me anything. Like, so the idea that, like, I'm already driving to the store, but I'm not going to give you a ride. I don't want to do you any favors. It doesn't cost me anything. I don't want to do any favors. Okay? So that's Midas Sodom. So there's a discussion in the Gemara whether you can force somebody to allow somebody to benefit from them, even if it doesn't cost them anything. Do you force somebody to not stand by this Midat Sodom, that I refuse to let you benefit from anything of mine, even at no cost to me? So the Gemara says this would be an example of Midat Sodom. These guys here at Broadway, if they would say, we don't want you, it doesn't hurt them. They anyway can't use the street. So they have no entitlement to say, we don't want you to be part of us. Let them be part of you. Nobody gets hurt here, and it benefits the guys down here. Okay, which is pretty funny, because this is like a legal principle of which street are they a part of, but it's just a way of saying conceptually, look, nobody gets hurt, this way is the best, helps one group and doesn't hurt the other group. We might as well define them as part of that group and not the others. You had a question? Okay. All right, so that's the idea of the sort of switching the Eruv Chatzeros into the Shituf Mavos, and which street are you a part of will determine which one you have to make a group with and which one you might impact to ruin their existing group. Okay. Now the Gemara says like this: Amar Rav Yudam Shmuel. Now we completely switch gears, so it's getting gradually easier. First, the thing about 3 courtyards and which direction can you carry, right? Rabbi Shimon versus the Chachamim. Then the issue about the courtyards between streets and which group of streets are you part of, the one that you most often use, unless you redefine it or unless it doesn't hurt anybody to define it in one way. That's that. Now we get to much broader statements about the whole nature of Eruv. And interestingly, although the focus of this parak has completely been Eruv Tchumim, since right now, for the last day or so, we've been talking about Eruv Chatzeros, we get like a very central discussion about the conceptual idea of Eruv Chatzeros right here in the middle of this parak. So let's take a look. And it's the same Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel. Okay? Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel. Hamakpid al Eruvo, ein Eruvo Eruv. If somebody says we all join together in some loaves of bread in our courtyard, so it's all considered to be one domain, it's a whole shared and unified courtyard, but I say I don't want to see anybody eating my loaf of bread. Okay, so yes, I contributed my loaf of bread, but nobody better touch it. By the when Shabbos is over, nobody can it better be just the way I gave it. So ein eruv eruv, you're not really part of the eruv, and therefore everybody's got a problem because now you don't have an eruv and nobody can carry in the courtyard. Okay, because the whole idea of the eruv is to make it a unified, which means, and here you're keeping your sort of presence, symbolized by the bread, as set apart from everybody else. And that's what he says. Mashmo, what's it called? Eruv Shmo. The whole point is that it should be an Eruv. That's lovely. First of all, it's very fascinating. That's sort of inferring halacha from like the name of something. And number two, it's like it's missing obviously more of the explanation. What do you mean by the word Eruv? So Rashi actually says two things. The most obvious thing is Eruv means like mi'urav, which means mixed together and unified as opposed to standing apart. But Rashi also throws in a line. Rashi says, if you look 4 lines down in the wide line, Eruv Shemo, Rashi says, Shukulam Mi'uravim, mixed together in one unit, and then he says, Umirutzimbo, they should be sort of, finding favor in one another's eyes, a sense of like camaraderie. Shelo yimchazeh b'chavero, ela shutfis nocha ve'areva. He specifically says areva, because eruv does not just mean mixed together, it means pleasant. Okay, so arev means pleasant. So therefore there should be a pleasantness, there should be a sense of community created by this, and you're actually setting yourself apart from the community. Okay, so very nice idea.
If somebody wanted to be a real, whatever, SOB, he could just say,
he could just say, I'm not joining in the Eruv.
And then nobody's...
Right. Yeah. Well, we'll get to that about people that sit out of the Eruv and how you deal with those cases. But here he's trying to participate, but he's still setting himself apart. Okay, so now the Gemara says, Rabbi Chanina Amar, Eruvo Eruv. No, actually it does work, even if you say, I don't want anyone touching my bread. Ela Shanikra Me'anche Vardina, but you are called from one of the people of Vardina, which is apparently a place known for its miserliness. So that's interesting in immediate contrast to the Gemara before about Kofin al Anshe Sedom. So people say, okay, you're stingy, you're miserly, but at the end of the day, even begrudgingly, you participated. It's enough to say, even when we have a community, it could be a real world community, it doesn't have to be an ideal community. So even in a real community, you have your stuff, but you're still part of the community. All right. So now the Gemara says like this: Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel, Acholik es eruvo eino eruv. Now, not only that, let's say you don't say I don't want anybody eating my eruv. You just say I want to keep my loaves of bread in a separate basket. We're all keeping them there at Charlie's house, but I want to keep my loaves in a separate basket. So it's also not good. Kiman. So Gemara says, Kiman, Kebeis Shammai? Are you saying like Beit Shammai Titania? We quoted this before. Chamisha Shegavu Esei Ruvan. 5 people joined together in Erev, and Nasnu B'Shnei Kalim, and they divided it into 2 vessels. Beit Shammai Yimim Ein Zeir, it's not an Erev, because it's not all unified. Beit Hillel Yimim Harei Zeir, it is good. So Gemara says, no. Afilu Tema Beit Hillel. He'd say this even going to Beit Hillel. Ad Kan Lo Kami Beit Hillel Hasam. Why does Beit Hillel says it's good there when you divide it into 2 Kalim? Ela Demalyin Lamana V'Yasir. You tried to put it all in one vessel, but it wouldn't fit, so you had left over. So perforce you divided it. So Beit Hillel says fine. When you are intentionally ensuring that your loaves are kept apart, that's very different. That's not like you couldn't put it together. It's like one person, Bedafka, wanted his stuff separate. That would not be good. That is not enough of a unified sense of an Erev. V'tarti lamali. Now, why did Shmuel have to say both cases? A, physically separate, or A, I should say, not wanting people to touch it, and B, physically separate. Tzricha, you need both cases. If you just told me the first case about saying don't eat my eruv, mishum dekapid, that's because you care and you're particular that nobody touched it, so you really say hands off. That makes it separate. But here, even if you want it kept in a separate vessel, but maybe you're okay if other people eat it, so keep physically separate is not as big of a deal. Or you could have said the opposite. If you had said here, because it's physically separate. There where it's physically all together, it's just you said you don't want anybody to eat it. Maybe that wouldn't have been a problem. You need both cases. But clearly Rav Yehuda Shmuel very much demands a great sense of unification symbolized by the Eruv, and something that challenges that might actually destroy its function as an Eruv. Rav Yehuda, so Rav Ava said to Rav Yehuda, who was the one quoting Shmuel, and he said this to them in the olive press, that's parenthetical, Debei Rav, the Rav's olive press, Debei Rav Zakkai, Rav Zakkai's olive press, Miyamar Shmuel HaCholek Esei Ruvo Eino Eruv, does Shmuel really say this, that if you set it apart, it's not good, Valmar Shmuel, but Shmuel says, Bayis Shemanichim Bo Eruv Ein Tzarich Litain Lo Asapas, that the house that you put the Eruv in does not have to contribute to the bread. So we all chipped together, everybody threw in a loaf of bread, we all brought it over to Charlie's house, we put it in Charlie's house. Charlie doesn't have to give a loaf of bread. Now, why is that? So the Gemara thinks that the reason is the following. Where are we? My time. What's the reason? Lav mishum da'amar. Isn't it because we say the kivin demanach besala command demanach hachadami? So isn't it because we say that even though because Charlie has bread for Shabbos, it's somewhere else. It's in his bread basket. So the bread in Charlie's bread basket counts together with the bread in the Eruv. That's why we think Charlie doesn't have to give bread. Because somewhere else in his house he has bread, and that's as if it's all together. So you see, the Eruv doesn't have to be physically together. Okay? Hachanami, why don't we say when the guy wants to keep it separate, Kivan demanach besala, command demanach hachadami, even if it's not here, it's like it's all together, and that should be okay. Now an obvious distinction could be that in one case you want to keep it separate. In the other case, it's just like accidentally it's not together. But the Gemara has an even stronger answer. Amar Leis, Rabbi Yehuda said back, Hassam afapish ein pas. You know what? It works in Charlie. Charlie doesn't have to give the bread, not because he has bread somewhere else in his house. Even if he had no bread anywhere else in his house, he was eating out for Shabbos lunch, he had absolutely no bread in his house, even so he doesn't have to participate in the Eruv. My timer, what's the reason? The Kuluhu Hachadairi. They all live here. We all are coming and living in Charlie's house this Shabbos. Because here's an interesting question. When we say the idea of Eruv is to unify us all, are we unified all as now like it's all big one territory, it's all communally owned space and we're all together as a coherent community? That's probably what you would most naturally think. But now the Gemara is saying that according to Shmuel's idea that Charlie doesn't have to participate, that's not what it is. When we all get together in the bread and we put it in Charlie's house, it's not all we're just one big community. It's actually we're all living in Charlie's house for Shabbos. That's what it symbolizes. So actually the entire courtyard and all of our houses for this Shabbos are essentially Charlie's. Okay, so that's a different idea. The other idea I have to tell you is a lot nicer, that it's all one as a community. But here it says, no, it's all one person. So the idea of an Eruv is you all join together and put in one person's house. That makes it all as if it all belongs to that one person.
Well, like an Eruv Chumen, right, where this is the place that
right, exactly, and we'll see that in a minute, that the place of the bread is like where we're all living, exactly. And it's not just, so because of that, he says exactly that, and we're actually going to see something very similar to that in a second. That's why Charlie doesn't have to participate, which is an interesting idea, because you would have thought, given Shmuel's statements before, that's so makbid about, not setting apart and everything coming together, you would have more maybe wanted to promote an idea of a complete collective, rather than we're all sort of becoming one with Charlie. Yes, Charlie.
So if where the food is where you're really living in terms of Shabbat, maybe we should light candles where we're eating.
That part they did not demand. Okay, anyway, so let's take a look as the more continues.
Charlie's providing like rent-free space.
Right.
So, that's his contribution.
Okay. That's a nice way of saying it. But again, it seems to be going further than that. It seems to be saying, in principle, Charlie doesn't have to participate. Because the whole idea is to make us all connected to him. He doesn't have to be part of the group. But again, go ahead.
They have to do this every week or once?
No, you can do it once and stipulate that, it would work for the whole year, right? As long as the stuff doesn't go moldy, which is why we use matzahs. Okay? Yes. All right. All right. So now the Gemara says like this. Okay. So the Gemara says, it says, okay, I'm a Shmuel. Now, here again, a statement in the name of Shmuel. Eruv mishum kinyan. Eruv is not like we were just saying a minute ago, that it's like we all have started Shabbos where our bread is. No, the idea is we give bread, and therefore, the way Rashi explains with this idea that it's all based on the house we're staying in, the Eruv is in, everybody gives bread to Charlie, and Charlie in exchange gives people rights, this may be more, rights to his house. Okay, so therefore, it's like an exchange. You give the bread, and in exchange you get a right to use Charlie's house, and we all become unified that way. Eiruvin, which is a very strange idea to think of it as transactional that way, and it's also strange because it doesn't seem consistent with Shmuel's emphasis before that it's about bringing people together. Here it's more about just transacting and taking part ownership in Charlie's house. So if that's what it's about, why do we have to use bread? Why can't we just all give Charlie like $1? So because Erev Shabbos you're not handling your money. So therefore, since maybe this all gets done at the last minute, they said do it with bread. But essentially we're all buying a share in Charlie's house. So the Gemara says, so heicha the Eruv miyah likni, okay, but if you actually went ahead and b'di'evet did an Eruv by all putting, giving Charlie money rather than by putting bread in his house, why shouldn't it work if it's all about a transaction? So, because that will lead people to thinking that it really is about money. And there'll be times they don't have the money, and they'll forget about the idea of bread, and they'll overemphasize the money, and they won't use the bread, and then we'll sort of ruin the Eruv in the sense that you won't be able to have an Eruv. So it seems a little bit extreme, all of this, just because we would allow it once as an exception, we're afraid the exception will overrule, will dominate, but if you say the idea is that it's all about a transaction, so within that mindset you could understand why you're afraid that using money will come to dominate. Okay, so that's a very strange idea, and it's particularly strange given, like I said, everything Shmuel said before, which much more speaks about like a symbolic unification as opposed to some type of a transaction of giving Charlie money and therefore owning a piece of his property. So that's one version. Now we're going to see one that I think is much more intuitive and was what Dov was saying before. Rabbi says Erev Mishum Dira. No, like Dov said, it's just like Erev Tchumim, where the bread is where you start Shabbos. So because we had bread in Charlie's house, we all started together in Charlie's house. Okay, so the Gemara says, "My binayu." What would be a what would be a practical difference between these two approaches? Iki binayu kli upachas mishrei pruta vikatan. Three things that would make a difference. Number one, a vessel. If it really is because of a transaction, so we said you don't use money because nobody has money in their house right before Shabbos. Nobody has money around. But let's say not money and not bread. Why can't I just leave, my shirt at Charlie's house? Because it'll be also like a transaction. I give him my shirt, he gives me rights to his property. Okay? So the Gemara is saying, according to Shmuel, in principle, you could do that. In principle, you don't have to give bread. In principle, you can give a vessel, maybe not money, but a vessel. It's all about a transaction. Again, very, very strange. What is the case about pachos mishrei pruta? Let's say the bread isn't worth a pruta. So if it's, again, about transactional, so you can't use something less than a pruta, it doesn't work for a sense of a transaction. If it's the idea that bread is where, if it has enough for a meal, it's where I start Shabbos, who cares how much it's worth? Okay? So it's like, what is it? They say the cynic knows what everything costs and what it says? The cost of everything and the worth of nothing and the value of nothing. Anyway, fine. So if it's about bread, if it's about bread as symbolizing presence and eating or whatever, it doesn't matter how much it costs. Okay? And how about katan? So katan cannot engage in a financial transaction. So therefore, if it's about a financial transaction, katan doesn't work. So which side of the equation does katan doesn't work? Rashi says the katan can't even deposit the Eruv for me. Like if I can't send my kid to contribute it because he can't be part of either side of the transaction. Tosfos says no, he wouldn't be able to be the homeowner. He couldn't transfer ownership of the house to the group, but maybe he could sort of contribute to the Eruv. In the end, the idea of this as a transactional model is very strange, and it does not seem at all consistent with Shmuel's statements before, which are very much about the symbolic unification. Okay, so how do we rule? If you look at the end of the Tosfos, the Katan, like 5 lines before the word Tosfos v'amar, he says, V'nira de halacha kerabba, the amar erev mishum dira. He quotes a lot of other Gemaras that speak like you can use this in a pruta, and all this other evidence that, yes, we rule that it's mishum dira. So, by the way, this just shows you the value of sticking through with things. We just got through this really complicated Gemara, and then we got this big prize here at the end, a nice straight discussion about, what is the symbolism of Erev about. It's about bringing everybody together, unifying, that nice Rashi about, areva, pleasantness, sense of a whole community. If you try to stand out, and somewhat separate your Eruv, that could be symbolically problematic, according to Shmuel. And then, in the end, this idea, which would seem consistent with Shmuel, the Rabbah's position, that the idea is, where the bread is, that's where we're all living. And that sort of is defined as that we're all sort of living together. And I should say, again, this idea that if it weren't for that position about that Charlie didn't have to contribute, the owner of the house didn't have to contribute, I think you would have said that we're all just one corporate community and we're all equal. By saying the idea that Charlie doesn't have to contribute is taking away a little bit from this. It's not saying we're all equal, it's saying we're all living together with Charlie. Charlie's invited us all to his house so we're all brought together, but again, not as some, equal corporate entity, but we're all brought together as living in Charlie's house. And then you did have this very strange position, which seems to be against everything of this, that sees it much more as transactional, as getting a piece of Charlie's house, but that seems to really be, a more marginal position. Okay, so now the Gemara wraps up with this. Amalei Abaye l'Rabba. So Abaye said to Rabba, "L'didach kasha l'shmuel kasha." I got a problem according to both of your approaches, whether it's transactional or whether it's like you're living there. Hatanya, we told him Brisa, Chamisha shagav with Eiruvin. 5 people made their Eruv. One courtyard made their Eruv. Kishen molichin es Eiruvin l'makam acher. Now courtyard A wants to join in together with courtyard B. Don't worry, it's not hard like the other case. Echad molich l'kulan. So you can send one guy from courtyard A to contribute to courtyard B. Okay, you don't need them all to do it together. So Gemara says, why is that? Who needed the kakani? V'sulo, if it's an idea of acquisition, so the one guy, Reuven, from courtyard A, he gets an acquisition into courtyard B, but not the rest of the courtyard. Or, let's say it's an idea of living. Who needed the Kadair? So now Reuven is also living in courtyard B, but not everybody else from A, V'sulo, and not everybody else. So the question is, okay, but whatever model you have, why does one person work for the whole courtyard? And the answer is obvious. Amalei, lo l'didi kasha v'lo l'shmuel kasha. It's not part to me or to Shmuel. Shlichus tekulu kavdid. When Reuven goes from A to B to participate in their courtyard, he represents all of courtyard A, right? Which is what you would have said anyway, regardless of what model you would have used. So yes, whether it's about acquisition or presence, when one courtyard joins with another, they send one guy and he becomes their representative. Okay, Amar Rab, Amar Rav Chama, Bar Guria, Amar Rav, Halach Reb Shimon. By the way, if you were wondering about A, B, and C, and all the stuff we discussed before, we rule like Rabbi Shimon that it does work, that A can carry into B, and B can carry into C, you just can't go from A to C. Okay, that whole previous discussion. Okay, but that was a very nice Gemara about the nature and symbolism of Eruv.
So now, for Rabbi Shimon, it's coming up to...
all right, Hilula Darash B, yes.
We talked about, here they talk about one guy being the shliach for the other 5. At one point in your ABC Bible, did you talk about A and B making their Eruv first?
Yes.
And no longer being A and B,
yes.
A, B?
Yes.
And then being able to contract with C?
Yeah, that's what the Gemara asked.
Right.
But the Gemara
why did we reject that?
Because the Gemara said, because A sat out that second transaction and didn't have any representative going to C, it makes it clear.
There was no A anymore. It was now A, B.
Yeah, but not totally. I mean, you have a substrata. I understand. Right, that was the Gemara's question, but the answer was that you still have a substrata of A, B, with an overlay. So then they were able to break out. But that was exactly the Gemara's question before. Okay, let's now move to the next Mishnah. We'll get back to Eruv Tchumim. Misha Babaderech. You're on a journey. The Choshkalo, and it's getting dark. Now, and you're just right outside your home. Almost there. You're only 4,000 amos away from your home. It's about to be Shabbos. will get there, and you know of a tree or of a wall that's midpoint between you and your house. And if you were to be able to start Shabbos where that tree or wall would be, you'd be perfect. You could get, because you'd be at the outer edge of, you're right, here's you, here is a tree, right, and here's your home, okay, and there's basically 2,000 amot each way. So if you could only start Shabbos here, then that would be your tchum. You'd be able to walk to the tree and walk from the tree to your home. Okay, so you'd like to be able to make an erev here, but you're 2,000 amos away. What are you going to do? And it's about to be Shabbos. So, the Amar, and you said, Shvisosi tachtav, you made a declaration without putting any bread there. You said, my Shabbos should be under the tree. Lo amar klum, gornish taufen. Why? Not because you just spoke without actually doing anything, because you didn't say specifically, you weren't more precise where your erev began. If you said shvizasi bi'ikaro, underneath the tree, well, you know, the tree has a big canopy, so that's, you don't know exactly where. But if you said at the root of the tree, meaning at the trunk of the tree, and you were very specific, then it's good. Nimsa mahalech mechashashecha arbat alafim ama. Then you can get, did I skip a line? Yeah, I'm sorry. She said, you can get 2,000 amos. If you're within 2,000 amos, you can get to the trunk of the tree. Literally the root. And then you can get from the tree to your house, 2,000 amos. So even after it got dark, you could walk in a straight line, 4,000 amos, because you've designated your thing there. Now, of course, what's interesting, and we've seen this discussion before, is I thought for an erev to work, you had to have either the bread there, or you had to physically be present. Okay? So here, you're not doing anything. You're just verbally designating. So whoever has to make an erev will just stay home, and I'll say, it's over there. So it might be a particular leniency that they allowed for the guy caught in the middle of the street. He's not sitting at home. He's going out to place his erev, and he just hasn't gotten there yet. Okay? And there we might have a certain leniency, but it is quite interesting that you can do it just totally verbally. Let's see the rest of the Mishnah. Okay. Now, in Eino Makir, let's say you don't know a specific place. You don't know of any tree that's within 2,000 amot. Oshenu Baki Bahalacha, or you're not smart enough to know that you could do something like this. You don't know the law. V'amar Shvizasi bin Komi. So you didn't have a tree to designate. So you just said, fine, I'll start Shabbos where I'm standing right now. You're not going to get home, but you wanted to not limit yourself to 4 amot. So fine. Then you go from where you start, 2,000 amot every direction. Tosfos points out that you don't really have to say anything. It just says you said, because the first part of the mission says you said. But the discussions before were if you're asleep. But then you maybe only have 4 amot, you don't have a place. But Tosfos says if you're awake and you're there at Shabbos and you haven't said anything, obviously where you're standing is where you begin Shabbos even without saying anything, and you have 2,000 amot. Okay, now we have an interesting discussion, the same way we had a whole discussion on how to measure the 4 amot, we have an interesting discussion on how to mention the 2,000 amot. So, what are these 2,000 amot? Agulot, they are a circle. Divrei Rabbi Chanina ben Antignos. V'chachamim omrim merubaot. The Chachamim say you can draw a square. Ketavla merubat, like a square tableau. Kadei she'niskar lezaviot, so you get the corners. Obviously, there's a big difference, right? If you're here, how do you draw your 2,000 amot? Do you draw a circle? Right, and with you're the center, and it's 2,000 amot, or do you draw a square, and you're the center, and then you get the additional corners, you get more space, right? And then the question is also which direction do you draw the square in, right? If it's a circle, it doesn't matter, but if it's a square, do you draw the square like that? Do you draw the square like that, right? It's going to matter what space it is in terms of which direction you draw the square in. Okay, but that's what they say. We will see more about that. Okay, now, V'zohi shamru hani marev beraglav. This case about getting stuck out in the street, we quoted this Mishnah before, is when they said a poor person doesn't need bread, can do it with his presence, and here you're poor effectively because you don't have access to any bread to do it. You're stuck in the middle of the road. The Amar Rabbi Meir, Ein lanu el ani. This idea you don't need bread, you can do it in person, is only if you have no other choice. You're poor or you're effectively poor. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, echad ani v'echad asher. You know what? It doesn't matter. Even if you had bread accessible, you're allowed to do it in person. Lo amru ma'avrim b'pat. They only said you use the bread. El lahakelo ashir. Shelo yitzei v'yarav b'raglav. They just did it to make it easy, that you don't have to go out and wait for it to become dark and stand there. You want to put bread there and come home, or you want to send somebody to put bread there, hate. But there's no problem if you really want to physically be there. That's what the bread symbolizes. So you might as well actually physically be there. Okay, so we saw this before, a debate of Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Meir, whether they only allowed in a necessary circumstance, you to do it in person, or you can always do it in person. Let's take a look at the Gemara about what happens when you try to start under the tree without a specific place. So, Milo Amar Klum, what does it mean if you said under the tree without designating the space? It's worthless. It doesn't mean anything. Amarav, Lo Amar Klum Kol Ikar, it is completely worthless. Tafilu Tachtav Shel Ilan Lo Matzi Azil. You can't even get under the tree. What does that mean? It means that, let me just take a look. Right. So Rashi basically says, you said you want to go under the tree, but you didn't say where under the tree. So since you didn't say where under the tree, right, the under the tree is like, there's a space. You didn't say where, so you didn't effectively put your Eruv here, or designate your Shabbos starting here, because you weren't specific. But you also made it clear you didn't want to start Shabbos where you were. So this isn't your space, and this isn't your space, so you only have 4 amot. You're totally stuck. Okay? You've totally ruined it for yourself. That's what Rav says. Shmuel has a much more sympathetic approach. So that's why Rav says you can't even get to the tree. You can't get anywhere. You're totally stuck. For Shmuel Amar, Lo Amar Klum Lebeso. No. Given that you weren't specific, you can't make it all the way to your house. Avol L'Tachtav Shel Ilan Matzi Aziel. You can get to the tree. V'nasa Tachtav Shel Ilam Chamar Gamal. And I'll read the whole thing and then I'll explain it. The underside of the tree became like that camel donkey driver. You're pulled in both directions, opposite directions. Balim don minat zafon, modim lo minat darom. If you want to go north, we'll start you in the south. Balim don minat darom. If you want to go south, modim lo minat zafon, we'll start you north. Which means what? Here's what he says. He says, right? Let's say this space under the tree is, let's say, 20 amot. Let's say it is 10 amot in each direction, okay? The space, and you don't know where in these 10 amot you start your Eruv, because you said under the tree, you weren't specific where. So what he says is, we just consider it as a suffix. Maybe your Eruv starts here, maybe your Eruv starts here. So what's the idea? You'll have 20 amot that's in doubt, right? If you want to go 2,000 amot in this direction, we say, whoa, no, maybe this is your Eruv. So you don't have 2,000 amot from this point, you only have 2,000 amot from this point. So if you want to go lidarom, moddim lo min hatzafon. So you can only go 1980 this way. Mm-hmm. Now, if you wanted to get from this point to your home, and it was exactly 2,000 amot to your home, you've got a problem. You can't walk in your door, because maybe your Eruv started here, and you only have 1980 from that point. So that's what it means. You can't get all the way to your home, assuming it's exactly at 2,000 amot, because this space underneath the tree is up for grabs, and we're always going to give you. You're being pulled in both directions. We're always going to measure it, in the way that is being machmir, because maybe you started on the other side. So you always you're going to lose effectively 20 amot to your Eruv in whichever direction you're trying to go. So that is the debate. Shmuel has a very small implication of not knowing the place. According to Rav, it's quite extreme. It basically is that since you didn't specify the space, you don't have any space and you're totally stuck. And let's just read, we have 2 more minutes, so let's just read the first sentence on Daf Nun, which spells out the reasoning of Rav. Amar Rabba, my time to Rav. What's the reasoning of Rav? Mishum delo Messiah Asrei, because you didn't designate the space, and not designating the space doesn't make it a suffix, and it's either this edge of the tree or that edge of the tree. Not specifying gives you nothing. So you made it clear you don't want to start Shabbos where you are. You didn't start Shabbos effectively in any place, and therefore you are totally stuck. So more about this tomorrow. All right.